Next, they're sponging the puce. It's a giant Q-tip. It's wet, and you're cleaning the barrel out. But there's a really special process in this. You can see the gentleman at the back of the gun. He's got his thumb over top of that hole, over top of that vent. When you yank back and you can hear that thud, that's a nice tight seal. What you've done is you've deprived the interior of that barrel of oxygen. That comes as close as you can. Fire!
This is the officers' quarters, and these quarters, or the position of officer, was purchased. So if you had money and position, you basically could purchase a position of being an officer. So they got to live in luxury compared to the soldiers. And this would be a mess hall where they would eat. So this was found buried. So something happened just before the War of 1812 that officers were eating, and they must have scrambled down. Very nice. Oh. Room here. This could have been for an officer that might have had a family, and the wife and children would come and stay as well.
The musket is not terribly accurate, so it's not going to do a lot of damage. These are mostly smooth bores, which means at 100 or 200 yards, you could potentially miss your target anywhere from 9 to 18 feet in any direction. So not exactly the most... Creating sparks. They land in a small dish on the side called the pan, which is filled with gunpowder. Igniting that gunpowder, sending a flame through a tiny hole. Misfire rates could be as high as 20 to 30%. If your musket is dirty, 100 men all point and fire at the same time. Enough muskets have gone off, thousands of muskets going off. You've got dozens of artillery. The smoke would often get so thick that identification became difficult out on the field. When you step out of that smoke, you want your friends to know, don't shoot me. So, blue dye became very hard to get a hold of. This is a downside of declaring war on your blue dye supplier. The cost of blue dye and its unavailability meant they had to start relying on other colored uniforms. So when the Army landed here in 1813, we have troops wearing brown, gray, black, white, whatever they could get their hands on. Just something to try to give them somewhat of a uniform appearance. The most famous of those alternative uniforms was the gray work jacket. At the Battle of Chippewa, which is just south of us here past the falls, Americans wearing gray did something not even the Emperor of France could claim, and that was meeting the British, equal counterpart, with some officers derisively referring them as dirty shirts. But those gray-coated men carried the day, and the gray coat became a symbol of the new professional American Army. And if you don't believe me, go to West Point. They're not in blue, they're in gray. Not only because it's the professional color, just like the British and their red, cheapest, it's a little bit cheaper for them. Command was located. Every regiment in both armies had two sets of colors. The British had the King's colors and the regimental. The King's colors were every regiment. So if you look out there, the regimental is the green flag, and then the King's is the Union flag. For the Americans, they also have a regimental and a national flag. They did not... much fancier looking uniforms. There's a simple reason for this. They paid for it. on both the British and the American Army, your uniform, your weapons, your equipment themselves. Begs the question, why are you spending all this money to get shot at? It was actually what you could get in reward for good service. In the British Army, men could be rewarded with land, titles, promotions, prizes, and some men could become very rich and very powerful. He proposed marriage to a young woman, and she refused him. Had been given to him, and his wealth today would be in the billions of pounds. But nobody called him a drunkard at that point. They called him law that came down to the fact that for a lot of the Americans, they had never seen an Indigenous person before, but they had heard the stories. Sensationalist newspapers. Canadian Volunteers was actually raised by a member of the legislature for Newark, what today is Niagara-on-the-Lake, alongside the American forces, and they fought hard. That is because if captured, they would be. Even in the aftermath of the war, none of them were allowed to return to Canada, and they were forced to settle in the United States afterwards. Now that Joseph Wilcox character, good news, he got his end at Fort Erie, where he was killed during a skirmish out on the field, put them out of their misery. For officers, they would also ask them to cut off the hooves of the officer, so that the officer's horses, so that they could prove the horse had been killed and get their insurance.